things are jacked up right now.
Yeah,
Seriously.
I know. Well, that's why I try to focus on the positive things, and I didn't really want this to be just oh, look at, because I mean, there's some really shitty things going on at the moment, and it's pretty horrible what's happening. And I thought this might be a good way just to, I guess, not necessarily like detract from what's happening and shed a positive light on it, but it's just maybe just to focus on some good things that are happening in the world, just because there's very few things going on at the moment, and I thought it might be a good thing to do.
Right.
So yeah.
So what's good for me is like, let's get real right now and connect,
Yeah.
So I'm going through this process of like, as a woman, and maybe this happens to men too, but you're just taught your whole life, like, be a good girl, stand in line, do everything nice, do everything right, people please.
Yeah.
And, in this time frame where there's nothing to do, and doing that, spending a lifetime doing that is actually the problem.
Yeah.
So I'm
Absolutely.
not people pleasing like anymore. If I can possibly help it, it's hard to break that, but to just try to get real with people. And that's been probably the most important thing. And that's what I would recommend for other people too, and during this time is like, get real, connect.
Yeah.
Don't, be true to yourself. And that's the way that we're going to find our way out of this ginormous mess that we got ourselves in. So you asked me how I started writing for Forbes. Well, really it starts how I stopped working at NASA. So I used to be the senior science editor at NASA's global climate change website, climate.nasa.gov. So I was like the big spokesperson for climate change there. And then less than a month after Trump took office, I started being censored. And the ethics office started intimidating me to try to shut me up. And management was like, well, can't you talk about instrumentation or Mars or some other thing? And I was like, no, it's the hottest temperature ever recorded. And, Trump is getting out of the Paris Agreement. And so I got forced out and lost my job.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, no, that was pretty fucked up. Like, really, it's been strange times with Trump though, because like with everything that's been going on, he's not necessarily just him, but it's just such a ongoing force of he's done wrong, and then this person's done wrong. It's all finger pointing. Whereas at the moment, it's really just we should get through it together, and then figure it all out later. Not necessarily who fucked up, but more.
Well, I mean, he did pull us out of the Paris Accord, and he did roll back fuel efficiency standards. And I mean, this isn't finger pointing. This is executive orders.
Yeah, no, of course.
Yeah.
But more so in these times now, where because it was a big deal for him to say, "Oh, stop doing transport from China," and he got absolutely slammed for that. And then it's only been a month later. And just throwing out, I'm not a Trump supporter or anything like that, so I'm not.
I'll be like, delete.
Especially being from Australia, I try to have more of an open mind to all sides, and because a lot of people in the US, it's really your diehard left or your diehard right.
Right. Well, I'm just talking about what's going to help the environment.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So there is no sides to science, right? Science is true whether you believe it or not.
Yeah.
And part of the problem with the current pandemic is leaders didn't listen to the scientists.
Yeah.
And it's the similar problem with climate change is that the leaders didn't listen to the scientists, and so what happens is that science gets politicized, and then there are sides. But amongst the climate and the science and the earth science or any science community, this only side is truth and facts and evidence. And so when there's things like science denial or ignoring of the science for political, then there becomes sides. But I think scientists feel, and including myself, it feels like we're being pushed into a corner to like make some equivalence to say, well, there's two sides. There's not really two sides to climate change. There's never been both sides to climate change. There's facts, and that's it. I mean, there's not two sides to gravity. There's not two sides. Yeah, it's
100%. That's all
made up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so I was forced out of my job at NASA, and so a friend of mine knew one of the science editors at Forbes, and so I just sent him quick email. So
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool.
yeah,
Yeah, because I mean, if it, it keeps if you've got a bit more of an online reach from it, you can certainly help more people, have more of an impact, and it's awesome. Because yeah, I mean, with everyone listening at home, initially it was, I'll just make sure I get this exact right, because it was called sorry, climate change hasn't gone away because of the COVID-19. And that's where
as
I
not.
came across your work, and yeah, I went down a bit of a rabbit hole, and yeah, I can see you've done some really cool things. So yeah, thanks so much for coming on the show today. It's I'm very honored for you to come on.
I'm happy to be on the show for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, anytime you get a chance to get the message out and tell the truth is good. So thank you for giving me that opportunity. And also just, I mean, I've been quarantining at home now. It's been over a month in California.
Yeah.
So, it gets a little stir crazy. You want to just feel like you're doing something.
Oh, definitely. And I feel after this is all over, once we do get through it, then yeah, there may potentially be a bit of a shift with how people spend their time here over in South Australia. We're not in a quarantine yet, but it is recommended to just leave for necessities like groceries and work and things like that. But I'm noticing a lot more people are actually out walking and running and things like that typically you don't see as often here. So that could hopefully be a bit of a positive outcome there as well, that people are willing to get out a bit more now that they've felt trapped in their own homes. Yeah, hopefully it helps in, as I said before, it's all about trying to find those little wins in such a trying time. So
Sure. I'd like
yeah.
to just add to that I'm not really hoping that there's a change. I'm actually working toward making a change.
Okay. Yep.
This is a huge opportunity right now, and you're absolutely right. There is a sense of stillness, and yeah, you saw that in that article. So the smog is way less. The acute pollution, right,
Yep.
is way less, and that's not just in Los Angeles or China. That's globally. Global emissions are down, and people are really noticing the difference. So here's an opportunity to, what do we want the world to be, instead of, oh, we're just going to go back to the way everything was. And it's caused, I think, myself and hopefully a lot of, no, not hopefully, I'm going to put this out there. We're trying to create a new world. So it's not that I'm going to just keep my fingers crossed and hope for the best. I want to put that message out there that this is our real chance to create the world that we want, that's not based on selfishness and greed and accumulating material possessions, but it's based on looking inward and trying to figure out what's really important, what's really necessary, what's really meaningful for me in my life and for my life of my community, so that we can have a better world than the one that we had 2 months ago.
100%. Yeah. And that's the thing, like, I mean, priorities right now, and as they should be, is, really slowing down the pandemic and saving lives. But once things start to normalize again, hopefully in the near future, because they say this could go on for not the lockdown, but they say, it could be ongoing with the whole corona thing floating around. But hopefully in the near future, the next few months or so, we can safely start to get out again, and it's not putting people's lives at risk or whatever. And from there, once the economy starts to fix itself as such, and everyone putting in effort. So I just had a bit of a thought that, well, maybe they're going to basically redistribute funds to allocate it less to, say, greener conservation efforts and things like that. So it's really trying to be proactive and see what everyone can do, and so opportunities like this where you're going to spread that message of saying, well, look, there are things you can do and to help, whether it's from home or once you're back at your job or whatever else. Because I mean, some negative uses or some changes from the COVID that I didn't even think of was that there's now a lot more single-use, like plastic cups and plates and things like that, which we do need. But it's something like that you don't even consider when at the moment it's all about, the pollution has changed. Because I mean, in China, like the skies have been the bluest they've been in like decades. India and all these places as well. But yeah, it's just it's strange times. That's basically how I can sum it up.
Very strange. Yeah, I saw some photos on social media of people here. Everybody's wearing masks and gloves to go grocery shopping, and
Yeah,
the parking lots, people are just throwing it down. And I've
really.
been like, I go to the gym a lot normally, but the gym has been closed for a month. So I'm walking at least 5 miles, sometimes more every day. I just
Oh,
walk
fantastic.
up and down the streets. And
Yeah,
yesterday I saw masks just thrown on the ground, and it's just
really.
like, really, really, and yeah.
Yeah,
So I mean, it's an opportunity. I do think that the indoctrination has just been about being selfish, and it's in society at large, and now's
yeah,
a chance to really come together and think, okay, we are interconnected. Anybody who didn't think they were interconnected is getting a wake-up call right now. We're interconnected. And
exactly.
yeah.
Well, because I think people forget that we are, just vulnerable, just apes basically. At any time, we're in this bubble of safety just because we're, a lot of us are in a first world country, and we're untouchable as such. But any time things can happen. I think this is a big wake up call for many generations, young and old. So it's certainly something that hopefully after this we can all kind of have a bit more of a sense of, okay, well, we're not immune to the elements, and especially with climate change and things like that, and hopefully we can all be proactive and do something to help.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an opportunity this time. I was just talking to a girlfriend of mine this morning about this, how the, I don't think we're going to be able to realize the opportunity until we suffer quite a lot more. I'm noticing, at least here, the sense of like this urgency to fix it and get back to how things were, or put a silver lining on it. There's this deep urgency, and I know in my life and people who I've talked to a lot, the deepest change came from like sitting and suffering for a while before you really kind of cracked out of your stupor. uh,
Yeah,
and I don't know that people have totally cracked down yet. I think that there's still a ways to go. We're gonna see quite a lot more suffering before we get to that place where there's real surrender and real like introspection enough to step forward and make real change.
yeah, I agree. Like at this stage, and as I was saying before, it'd be nice if it was, in the near future that it gets rectified. But I mean, really, I can see in the coming months more anxiety, depression, people just being stuck at home, can't go out. There's still a lot of niceties around. Like we still have internet, we still have all these things, and so it's still a bit of a bubble of this immunity, and it's if we stay home we'll be okay. And I think that people eventually will start to realize like, oh shit, like okay, this can affect us, whether it's okay, someone younger may not necessarily be affected, but then there's also cases of athletes at 24, 25 getting it in parts of the world and they're getting absolutely rolled. So yeah,
Well, I mean, it depends on if you know somebody who has it, if you know somebody who's passed from it.
yeah,
I mean, those are important things. So I think there's a certain percentage of the population who hasn't yet been affected, in the sense that maybe they don't know anybody, or maybe they haven't been sick, or their friends haven't, or family haven't been sick. And then there's other people who have been sick themselves, right? Or they've got friends and family who are sick. And then there's a lot of people who have, like, their income has just dropped to zero. And I mean, I know lots of people like that.
yeah, same.
And so what happens, it's been a month, when people's savings start to kind of run out, when more and more people get sick, and we'll see. I'm not quite sure how it's affected, but here, I mean, we know people, my husband knows a bunch of people who have passed,
Yeah, I'm
and I
sure
know quite a few people have been sick. So I also know, I was talking to a girlfriend just yesterday. We do a lot of like talking on the phone these days, but people are afraid of getting sick. I mean, I know quite a few people who have the underlying conditions of whatever age, and they're, have genuine fear of
Okay.
of contracting it.
Yeah.
So, we don't really have testing enough to know who has it and who doesn't.
Yeah, well, there's only so much you can do. I mean, like South Australia I've been very lucky with where I'm living. SA is basically one of the leading in the world for testing quality at the moment. We're powering through, and I've been testing myself because I had a little bit of a scare a few weeks
Wow.
ago, and it's not pleasant, but it can save lives. It was funny.
Totally.
The woman basically, you drive up in your car and you park, and then when you're ready, you pull up to the side. And all the women there, I'll tell you, absolute heroes as well, by the way, just, yeah, but being on the front line, trying to help out. So she gets, first she puts something on my tongue just to look down my throat. And she goes, all right, well, you're in a sec, you're either going to cough or gag. If you cough, please go to the left, and puts it down and turns out I'm a gagger. But yeah, then they get something to stick up your nose just to twizzle it around, and it actually hurt quite a bit. She stuck it up further than I've ever had anything up my nose, even as a child when you get Lego stuck up there. But yeah, just jam it right up there, and it was an interesting experience. But yeah, SA is just doing a fantastic job in just powering through.
Yeah.
All
Yeah,
the tests.
we're not having that. We've had in this country, we've had like not enough testing,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's part
exactly.
of the problem. So people are afraid, you
Yeah,
know, and
100%.
yeah. So, I mean, let's just to bring it back to climate change. I think that there's so many parallels in the sense of, I mean, we know the science around it, but what we don't know is what the response to the challenge is going to be, right? So is it going to be handled well, where there's, like in your case, you're saying, oh, here we've got lots of testing, so life can go on, whereas if it's handled poorly, then the suffering is much more extreme, and it's much worse. And so we don't know how are people going to handle, there's so many aspects of it. So there's one is to lower the emissions. How are we going to handle that? We're
Yeah.
not handling it at all. And then how are we going to handle the impacts of fires and sea level rise and heat waves and tropical cyclones? So, we, like in America, they fired the entire pandemic response team in
I did
20
hear that. Yeah,
they did, yes.
crazy. Yeah,
So, it would have been handled better if there were plans in place. So, the people who are experts at this can kind of tell you what's going to happen. And the same thing I think is happening with climate change, in the sense of, there's people who spent their career, decades, planning for these things, who understand what to do. And if we don't put them in place, then when we know these things are happening. We know that there's going to be heat waves. We know that there's sea level rise. So there's increased flooding. We know there's tropical cyclones, and we know that there's increased wildfires, right? So how are we going to handle all these impacts when they are for sure coming? And that's one of the things that I do wonder as we approach, hurricane season, for example. There's no plan in place. What happens if the hurricane comes right on top of this pandemic?
yeah,
So we're
it's
supposed to
scary.
be sheltering at home, but then there's a hurricane, no plan whatsoever. So I think and again, as a person who comes from the science background, we wish that the leaders would listen to the scientists so that they can plan better. So scientists aren't politicians. We're not in charge of cities. We're not in charge of states. We're not in charge of federal governments. So we can only give the information to those people in hopes that they would use it. And so far, the majority of the countries on planet Earth have kind of dabbled a little. I mean, even, the Paris Accord, we would have to reduce our emissions way more than we already are, even to keep it below the worst kind of case scenario. So it's almost like the pandemic people who knew that this was coming, right?
Yeah,
They predicted this was coming, yet nobody listened to them. So now we're having, some version of the worst case scenario, depending on what country you're in, right? And this could have been prevented.
oh, definitely. And it's hard because, like, with the COVID especially. Like there's always different viruses around, and you can only allocate so many funds. So you can do your planning, but how do you plan for something this drastic? Because as you said, that the hurricanes is a perfect example. Whereas if something like that happens right now, do we just throw out that everyone's got to stay at home? Do you flee? What do you
But
do?
you shouldn't say if, you should say when.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, that's fair enough.
When,
Yeah.
because I mean already the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has predicted a above average hurricane season, so they're coming
Well, okay.
this year. So they're coming this
yeah.
season. We know there's going to be more wildfires, both Australia and California. We're laden with wildfires, So it's like, how do you do your best to kind of get the firefighters in place, get the mitigation strategies in place, get the plans in place, because it's happening, right? Same with heat waves all across certain parts of the world. So how do we plan for this? And then how do we plan to reduce our emissions? There's very little focus on planning. And you were talking earlier about, the cost of, researching all these species who are carrying viruses. But if we just spent more money on that, it's actually cheaper. The biggest cost of preventing a pandemic is still going to be cheaper than the cost that we're paying now. And it's the same, there's been an argument for a decade. Oh, well, climate change, getting a clean energy economy is so expensive. Well, the alternative is hundreds, if not thousands of times more expensive, right? There's already been $2 billion storms in America, US $1 billion storms, just this year. And, we're not even in storm season, and there's already been $2 billion storms.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like with Australia had that immense fire last year, and that was that everyone was affected by that. As I was saying before, very very lucky with the testing at the moment for COVID was not everyone has those facilities. Whereas on the flip side of things, for those fires, it was very close to home. So it's a lot more realized for everyone here. So it was something like 500 million animals were killed in the fires. There was that big thing online where the Amazon fires were happening, and the Australian fires was something like 5 times that. It was crazy.
Crazy. Yeah, I think I wrote about that. All the different fires. But yeah, I mean, some of that stuff you can't put a price tag on it, because once it's gone, it's gone. I mean, you see the barrier reef as well with the coral bleaching. And I mean, coral, the species of coral have been on planet Earth for 300 million years, and humans have been between 5 and 6 million years. So we're taking out other species along with us with our heating up the planet.
Yeah, because it's really been less than, I think, about 100 years, and that basically with the coral reef has been so much more affected. I've been up there myself, and to see the bleaching is really quite sad. Especially where there was so many different habitats housed up there, the Great Barrier Reef, and now there's really hardly anything in comparison. And it's just, it's we've caused it as well. So it's really just so hard to disprove the science. As you said before, science is fact. It's not there's this left and right. It's just fact.
Well, the thing that you had kind of reached out to me about is that, how in this acute time where we are polluting less, a lot of the short-term pollutants have diminished. And you can really see that the planet, how I like to call it, like cigarette smokers, once they quit smoking, their lungs kind of get back together relatively quickly, right? And you can see the same with this pollution, right? The planet wants to restore. It really does. And I feel like someday in geologic time, someday way out into the future, we will, as a planetarily, restore. But the problem that I think people don't understand now, and specifically about that piece that I wrote, and this would be the message, and I'm going to keep writing about this, but this is the message that I want people to hear. I'm glad that people noticed that the air is cleaner. And I'm glad that people got a little uplifted feeling that the air is cleaner, as well they should. But that has nothing to do with climate change, because climate change is the there's a few gases that cause climate change, right? Methane and the CFCs, but the most important one is carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
And carbon dioxide is colorless and odorless, so you can't see it anyway. And that has not really been affected so much by the pandemic. I was reading this article in Carbon Brief over the last few days, and it talks about the exact amount of carbon pollution that's been reduced in this month of not burning, or burning way less fossil fuels.
Yeah.
And it's 4%. So planet Earth is on track in 2020 to have about, and again, this depends on how long the pandemic goes on and what happens after, but about a 4% reduced carbon dioxide adding to the atmosphere, right? 4%. Yeah. But in order to reach the goal of 1.5 degree increase, right, by 2050, in order to reach that goal, we would have to reduce the carbon pollution by 6% every single year for the next decade.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And we only reduced it by 4% by doing nothing and everybody staying at home.
Yeah.
So how the hell are we going to be reducing it by 6%? We're going to blow through that. I mean, look, it's possible. It's possible. We have, look, I worked at NASA for a decade. There was a concerted effort to do something that people didn't think that they could do. We all got together and we said, let's do something really hard. We love a big challenge. Big challenges are what we live for. When we all pull together, we could make it to the moon, right? And people were like, that's impossible.
Yep.
And so that's always been, and what's inspiring to me about NASA is like that goal to do the impossible. But people have to commit, and people have to work really hard, and people have to, not like, that was one of my favorite presidential sayings. So I had not been fired from NASA yet. And I was speaking at South by Southwest. And this was March 2017. So Trump had been in office for about 5-6 weeks. And so ethics office was like calling me all the time about my speech. And they're like, they're going to ask you about Trump and da 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 da. So I was like, well, what can I say? And they're like, well, you can talk about any president you want as long as they're dead. So I memorized 2 quotes from 2 dead presidents to just have. Yep. And, so the Kennedy quote, of course, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. Right? So we need to get that in our head, both for the pandemic as well as for climate change, and in general for everything in our lives. Like, don't do things because they're easy, do them because they're hard, because it's motivate you, it'll inspire you, it'll lift you up. So I'm not saying that there's no chance and we're all doom and gloom. There's a chance, but we have to wrap our heads around being motivated to doing these really hard things, and then it's possible. But just sitting on our ass and be like, well, somebody else can, somebody bring me a Tesla, can you bring me a Tesla? Like, that's not going to solve the problem.
No, 100%.
And it's certainly leadership. So it's leadership, communities, individuals all coming together.
Education,
and it's totally doable, but it's going to have to be a pull together, and it's going to be a heavy, heavy, heavy lift. And so that's why we need people to talk straight. We don't need it as like, oh yes, everything's great, la la la. We need like this is gonna be fucking hard. You're gonna get through this thing, but you're gonna have to work your ass off. You're gonna have to like really wrap your head around this whole big change. There may be some sacrifice of the old, but look at what kind of new opportunities we get. And yeah, the goal is to live, right? To have other species live, and to maybe have a clean environment where we can all kind of prosper and breathe and Definitely. Not overheat.
Yeah, for sure. Because it feels good to, put yourself through things that don't feel good, because out on the other end, then you've got, through adversity, you develop a sense of pride because you've put in effort for something that wasn't easy, but you've come out the other end stronger. And a lot of people just don't live that way. They just sit on their ass all day and they'll go to work and come home, and that's the end of it. And those that
sure. Nobody who got up and forced themselves to go to the gym felt shitty afterward.
Exactly.
You may be like, I'm not in the mood, but you force yourself to go, right, to some class or something, or maybe you just work out on your own. And always you're like, yeah, I'm glad I did that,
100%. And it doesn't have to be much. Like last night, I just could not be bothered. I was like, I really need to get some exercise done. I've just been, inside all day. So luckily is once again, we're still allowed to actually go out for some period of time. I'm not sure how long that will be, but at least for now we can. So I'm really trying to utilize it as much as possible. And I really couldn't be bothered doing a run or anything like that. So there's a hill near me, and it sounds pretty bad, but it's basically just a hill, and that's all it was. And I just walked up this hill. But looking at my watch, I mean, my heart rate was just as high as it was if I was running, because it was a big fucking hill.
And you feel better afterward, even if you're not in the mood to do it. And I think we just need to kind of wrap our head around that as a culture, as a society, as a community, and be like, okay, this might hurt a bit, when you're first lifting that weight, when your legs are a little stiff, on the way up the hill. But then at the top, you're like, oh, right, I did this thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's where leadership comes in. And it doesn't necessarily have to be political leadership. It could be leaders like you and I, who are leading,
Communities
culturally.
as such. Yeah.
To like inspire people to say, okay, this is possible, this is doable, but it's not just going to be like, oh, well, we sat at home for a month, climate change is fixed. Carbon dioxide, unlike the smog that we're seeing, stays in the atmosphere about 2,000 years. So the average carbon dioxide molecule. So we're kind of stuck with this.
Yeah, so it's not going away anytime soon. Yeah, wow, I didn't realize it was that long.
With the carbon that we've already put in the atmosphere and all the impacts. And then we're also stuck with the challenge of getting off our addiction to fossil fuels and creating a clean energy econozy.
Yeah, definitely. And I think education is a big part of that, because there's
those really huge challenges.
I mean, look, you even look at the fact that there's still flat earthers out there. It's incredible to me. So, so yeah.
That's one of the things that I do is I try to make science not this thing that's like, a turnoff. So when I was a little kid, I didn't like science. I had this teacher, I remember, and he was like really stooped over, and he had big ear hair sticking out, white ear hair, which is scary. Scary for an adult woman, but can you imagine in middle school? And then he would go back where the beakers and the Erlenmeyer flasks and stuff, and he would drink. And the kids would just misbehave. So that was like my science class. So, and I think that's more common than not. And, a lot of the science is like cold and aloof that you see, or it's like somebody else who's smart is doing the science, but it's not for everybody. Right. And so I think that's one of the things that I've been working on is to make science accessible for people. So you don't have to be like the straight A student or whatever. It doesn't really matter. But everybody could understand the basics of like citizen science or how to understand science, so that you're not like stuck in those conspiracy theories about flat Earth. And
don't forget that 5G that's coming about.
Oh, yeah. There's so many things. There's a lot of conspiracies. You go on social media now, people have a million conspiracies. I think this doctor's been quieted who's got the cure, and I'm just like, oh my God.
Well, there's been nearly 100 cases in Britain, and I'm in disbelief of this. But yeah, there's been nearly 100 cases in Britain of either arson, vandalism, or telecom staff being harassed because people think that the 5G towers are calling the coronavirus. And it's like, dude, like, seriously?
It started probably in middle school with a bad science teacher who terrified the crap out of kids. And I mean, look, if you're a middle school science teacher and you're amazing, I wish I had you as my teacher. And sometimes it just takes that one teacher. I was a college professor for about 13 years. And my goal was to like turn them, not necessarily into like having to get a PhD and become a researcher, but yeah, they'd come in and they'd kind of sit, with their arms across their chest going, okay, bitch, get me through this.
Yeah.
I just want to fulfill the requirement, and they'd give me this scowl, and I'd be like, no. And I really feel like, part of it is, it's not all on the scientists. Like, you can't blame again, but we can control how we talk to people. Scientists don't need to be condescending. There's no need. Why?
Yeah.
They don't need to say like, oh, I'm so smart, I have all the answers, and like, you don't know anything. Like, there's no point for that. But yeah, I think there's an opportunity to be more inclusive. There's that stereotype that the scientist is like an old white guy with crazy hair and works alone in a lab and never gets laid. And we just
Yeah.
totally need to get rid of that stereotype. Although it's, that's the scientist in the movies. It's never like a group of people who are like normally emotionally and have like healthy lives. So, I've been working to replace that that myth that's
Yeah,
what a
yeah. So
scientist
it's
is,
no
right?
longer Robin Williams in Flubber, for instance.
Exactly. There's so many. You could just think of it, and they go way, 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 way back. But
Yeah.
yeah, we need to replace that, and so that people, when they look at each other, they can have a conversation, a legitimate conversation, an educated conversation based on evidence and
Yeah.
objective reasoning and critical thinking and all those fun things.
It is hard to get that message across sometimes, though, because I mean, we all, it sounds simple enough, but we don't know what we don't know, and especially now with the reach of the internet, and many confirmation biases because of the algorithms in Facebook and YouTube and Instagram. If you like something and you watch something, it's just going to keep showing you more and more of that because that's what you enjoy spending your time doing. And
Sure.
these big platforms want to keep you on those platforms, which is very clever, but then it keeps you trapped in a bubble. So even going back to say flat earthers, for instance, not hating on flat earthers, but just as an
You can
example.
hate on flat earthers, fine.
Look, they're not, as long as they're not hurting anyone.
But I saw there was something about like, there's flat earthers everywhere around the globe.
Yeah. Yeah, it's ridiculous. I don't understand it. But if you watch a video on that, for instance, they're going to show you more and more of it. And then you think, okay, well, I don't know any better. This is the only information that's coming through all these channels that I'm tuning into. So it's going to reconfirm what I think I already know. And so, yeah, you're just going to keep learning more and more of that. So to learn something new, it's quite challenging these days, unless you've actually got that mindset of, I would like to learn something new. Let me jump on a different website, or let me jump on a different news, website, or whatever it may be. And it's very challenging to have that mindset if you've never tried to have an outside thought like that before.
Sure. And at the same time, too, I think that the people who are creating these misinformation campaigns, they're spending, like, where compared to a research scientist that's spending a lot of time, their career, right, dedicating their whole career to doing research,
Yeah.
where you've got these other people, the disinformation people, are really not doing any research. They're just spending all their time on marketing, messaging,
Yeah.
misinformation. So, the science community has the opportunity to, up its game on communication, messaging, and we are. It's just we're behind because the science community again has been spending a career working on the research side of it, and less emphasis on the communication side of it. And I think there is starting to become like a legitimate position as a science communicator, somebody who is really studying the communication side of it. um, uh, and it's also, yeah, it's part of the consumer's responsibility to be a smart consumer and not get kind of suckered up into you know all the rabbit holes of silliness. I
Yeah.
mean, you see it too, with like the whole anti-vaxxers, and this
Don't
was
get me
about
started.
a year ago. My husband and I were walking the dog, and we came across a small sign on someone's lawn, and it said, "This lawn has been treated with dihydrogen monoxide."
Yeah.
Like, so I walked past, and I walked, I'm like, dihydrogen, that's water, right? Dihydrogen, two hydrogens, monoxide, H2O. And
Yeah.
I'm like, what? And so I Googled dihydrogen monoxide, and there was this whole thing. It was like, people are afraid of fancy names of chemicals. because they sound bad, right? And you look at, the ingredients, and it's got all these unpronounceable things. So it was just fucking with people, and they were like, yes, dihydrogen monoxide kills X amount of people a year, because people drown.
They do.
And it was scaring the crap out of people, and it's water. Just because people don't understand the scary names. And so this whole idea was you could use the fact that people don't understand the names of things to scare them and manipulate them into being afraid of something like water. And yes, the grass was treated with water. They watered their freaking grass.
Very nice, yeah. Well, I mean, if someone's got a sign in their lawn, there's the first red flag to begin with.
I think they were having what we did end up talking to the person. They weren't out that day, but I was like, why do you have that sign there? That's weird. And they were like, yeah, well, we were having an argument with the neighbor, and we wanted him to stay off the lawn.
Okay.
It's like the version of the old guy going, get off my lawn, so instead they just like freak you out with some really bad science.
Just being passive aggressive with intellect, basically.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love that.
But it does show you that people can be manipulative if they want to with their messaging.
Definitely, yeah. And so it's great that there's platforms like this where it's just a very honest, open conversation, and I really try to be very open-minded to both sides of every conversation. So as I was saying before,
I'll just add that about the dihydrogen monoxide.
Yeah,
I think
please.
The average person would see that and just be like, oh, I'm too stupid to know what it is, and like not even try, right? Yeah. And I was like, I have a little bit of confidence around my scientific ability, and I don't think I'm better than anybody. I'm saying that, okay, I have confidence. How do I share that with you? How do I get you to think that you're confident, right? Dihydrogen, you could figure it out. Like, this is like a little puzzle, right? You could figure it out if you didn't walk by it thinking intimidation, dihydrogen monoxide, right? If you just walked by it and thought, okay, I'm not intimidated, you could probably reason that out just as well as I could. And when I say you, I mean anybody listening.
Of course, it went over my head, but my partner hates it. Anytime I'll jump on my phone just because there's something will come up, and I'll be like, oh, I'm just curious. I'm going to Google that.
And Google
not
it.
Again.
Yeah.
Like, every time. I'm just a very curious person.
You can Google it, or you could just be intimidated and freak out and be like, I don't want to touch that lawn. Don't let the dog step on it,
Yeah. Well, it does. It, without, having any real forethought to it, it does sound like some sort of poison or something. They're like, oh, hang on, actually, your plan A actually makes perfect sense.
The monoxide is evil, one oxygen. It does.
Oh, shit.
It does. I mean, that was a big lesson for me, that people are intimidated by scientific terms that they don't understand. And fair enough. So, I mean, there's so many ways to remedy that. It's in school, you could remedy it. You could not use the terms. You could make people feel more comfortable with the terms. I mean, honestly, I wish that people would be less intimidated around science and start to kind of open up around there a little bit. I can't tell you how many people are like, oh, I'm too stupid to be a scientist, or I'm not good at math. That was like the most common thing when people would find out I work at NASA, they'd be like, oh yeah, I used to like science when I was a kid, or oh, I'm not good at math. And it's like, wait, stop criticizing yourself. But we go straight to that, like, I suck place really commonly.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I know I'm certainly not super intelligent, but I just live my life by that, and I'm okay with it.
But is that true? I mean, or is that just like some weird? And I'm not accusing you of this. I'm just saying culturally.
Yeah, no, I'm kidding.
Like
yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean.
Brag shit. Oh, I'm not.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if it happens with guys too, but with women, it's like you're not supposed to be smart.
Not so much here, maybe in the States, but yeah, no, I know what you mean. It is a bit of a humble brag. It's just being a bit silly, really. But we should really try and be learning all the time. And that is why I love jumping on this thing. It's
like, I'm confident about my intellect. I'm okay. I'm not the smartest person that ever walked the planet Earth, but I'm good. Like, what's wrong with that? I'm good, and we don't have to choose between, like, I guess a guy, it's like athletic, right? Women have to choose between being pretty and being smart, and guys have to choose between being like fit. you know,
Okay,
like
yeah. I
the
have
job.
noticed that the last maybe few years or decade or so, there has been a bit more of a shift to be more of a for males. It's not just about the athleticism; it's now about the intellect as well. So I guess that's a good thing that if everyone's
It
striving
is.
to be smarter. Because back in school, for instance, it was the dumb guys that got the girls as such, and that was just something that your peers viewed. And over time, it's now progressed, and so it's certainly a good thing. And with just your general population television shows and things like that, I've noticed now using say Big Bang Theory as example. I mean, I haven't seen that in years, but it was a bit of a laugh back in the day, and that brought a bit of intellectual jokes to it that the general population could watch and enjoy. And there was a few things that I picked up on from that show. For instance, I didn't know you're not supposed to put bread in the fridge because it makes it go off quicker. So so it's things like that, just in the general population now, it is helping with everyone to get that little bit smarter here or there.
Absolutely. And so encourage everybody to embrace your intellect and water it,
Exactly.
water it
So
with dihydrogen monoxide.
exactly. So I mean, for those listening at home, so what do you think that they can do to help educate themselves on science or on climate change, or even any science that they are passionate about? Like, is there any channels that you recommend that people can go to or visit or anything like that?
Well, what do I I'm working on a podcast. I'm not sure when it's going to be released. I'm working
Okay.
on it with my brother.
Yeah.
So he's a geneticist. He actually, I haven't had a chance to read. He just texted me. He's working on a COVID-19 test to see. He
Oh
just
wow.
texted me.
Okay.
So we're trying to demystify it. I mean, there was any of the NASA websites certainly are super interesting, but what science stuff do I follow? I guess I read like NASA and NOAA, and I follow like researchers, Arctic researchers. I'm super interested in the Arctic and Earth science. Uh, they're like legitimate, nature and science and National Geographic and those. I mean, some of those nature shows are kind of amazing.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
definitely. Have you been to the Arctic a few times? Because I
I
saw,
have.
I
I've
was
been to
reading an
Greenland.
article, and I saw a photo of you out in the snow, and it looked awesome.
Yeah, I've been to Greenland a couple times. Yeah.
Oh wow! So what were you doing over in Greenland? Was that through NASA?
Yeah, that was with NASA. So we know that the glaciers are melting, the ice sheet is melting.
Yep.
But we wanted to know and we know that the speed that it's melting, but we want to know it, and we also know it's increasing, right? The rate of melt is increasing, but we want to know what the rate of melt is, because that's how we're going to be able to know, are we going to get, 10 meters of sea level rise or 50 meters of sea level rise. So we were measuring the rate of ice mass loss on Greenland.
Okay.
So it's pretty amazing. I mean, I thought I was going to be sad to watch this beautiful thing melt, but it was just so beautiful. I was just blown away. I couldn't be sad while I was looking at this thing of immense beauty.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. There's some places in the world that it's just you're in awe about how like wonderful and beautiful it really is. And the Arctic or Greenland, would be one of those places I'd love to visit, just because it's just absolutely amazing.
so untouched by people, it's really, really out there. I've been to Iceland as well. People get those two confused. Iceland and Greenland are very, very different. Iceland's like a place. Greenland's like out, like
Yeah.
it's really hard to go there. There's like nothing there. It's, whereas Iceland, there's like cities and people and bars and cafes, and
Yeah.
Greenland is
Not
like,
quite the same.
yeah, muskox,
Yeah.
I'm from muskox.
So,
Yeah.
what's been more of the interesting places you've visited through work? Because I'd love to hear a bit about with your career and what you've done, and got any interesting stories as well about while you've been out in the world.
Well, Greenland was for sure the most interesting place I went to with NASA. I mean, I, went to a whole bunch of different science conferences, in America, but, certainly Greenland was was the most interesting place. But I lived in Southeast Asia for 7 years,
Okay.
and you
Yeah.
know, so I've lived in Hong Kong and Thailand, and I've been to China a bunch. I've been to a wet market in China.
They actually just reopened the wet markets. I couldn't believe it. Like they said that
I thought they were going to stop. I know it doesn't make sense.
I mean, I understand like they did say it's where a lot of people get their livelihood from and they need to eat. And I do understand that people need to survive, but it's just not the right time. Like it's support your country in other ways. I'm sure that China's got enough funds down. I mean, the amount they spend on their military, I'm sure they can help with a little bit of food just in these coming months. It's crazy.
And I mean, why do we need to eat these weird species, Like, and even, I'm not saying that everybody needs to become a vegan, but I know that we can all eat way less meat. Even if you're eating some meat, you can have it as a side dish, or only, every other day. You don't need to eat meat with every meal, the main part of the meal. It's completely
Exactly. I've tried to cut down my meat. I still enjoy meat and I still eat it all the time, but I've certainly reduced it to.
There's no need. And
Yeah.
vegetables taste amazing.
I,
They do. And you can, that's one of the things I've been focused on now that I'm here at home. So I had planted a garden before this whole thing, and it's been really growing. And then I've planted more food, and I've been trading food with my neighbors who are also planting food. So that's been really nice. And, to just be able to eat the food that you grew right there out of your garden is
it's so
amazing.
fresh and juicy. It's you go to the supermarket and you forget how fresh vegetables can actually be. Unfortunately, where I'm at the moment, there's not enough room to really grow a lot of vegetables. But a few friends, they've got big backyards and things like that.
Tomatoes in just a pot,
A friend, he had a big tomato garden at the back, and he had to actually get rid of it because it was bringing a lot of mice into his house.
Oh my God! Wow.
So there's some unexpected side effects of that because if you buy a tomato from the supermarket, the last thing you want to do is just bite into it like an apple. But if it's a fresh tomato, it's very enjoyable to do. But unfortunately, with all the mice that were floating around his garden, he's got little dogs and a rabbit as well. And he's like, "Yeah, look, I've just got to get rid of these."
Wow. No, we haven't had any intruders. We rescued a possum the other day, a baby possum.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of fallen off its mother a little too early, so we took it to a possum rehab person. They're rehabbing it and then fattening it up and sending it back out to the wild. You were asking me other stuff about. Ask me some more stuff about NASA. I don't know. We could talk about tomatoes and mice. And
Yeah, no, absolutely. We talk about NASA for sure. I'll just throw in there with you mentioning about the possums. A few weeks ago, before they closed down a lot of the tourist attractions, I went up to do a visit Monado Zoo, which is one of the biggest. Basically refuges for in the southern hemisphere for lions and tigers and all that sort of thing. And the night before, we booked in a ghost tour, and I know it's a load of shit, but I thought it'd still be a bit of fun, just to experience it anyway. The highlight was probably where there was no light pollution, so you could actually see all the stars.
nice.
But we were walking, and I was with my partner, and we heard this rustling, and initially, some people think, oh, is it a ghost? And then we turned, and it was a big possum right there, and she shit herself. Oh, it's a possum.
We've had that. My husband and I were sleeping, and the bedroom window was open. It was a nice warm night, and we hear this. And it's just the exact cadence and weight of like a human. And he gets up, he gets the big flashlight. He's, I'm like in the bed, and he's like going outside, and he looks down, and it's this big possum. He's got like a knife in one hand and the flashlight in the other.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. So maybe, a bit of a segue there. So you said before you were living in Asia for about 7 years or so.
7 years, yeah.
So what was that like over there? What were you doing over there? And what prompted the move to Asia?
So I had got my degree, and I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And, George Bush, the first one, got elected, and I was just like, I don't, America. Sometimes I do get embarrassed about America. America.
Yeah.
I am America. Yeah, it's sort of embarrassing. We're like a bunch of fucking hillbillies, and I'm just like, I'm out. So I was gonna do like a year abroad, and everywhere I went, I just kept getting offered jobs. So I stayed, and then there was the Gulf War, and then I was like really embarrassed about America because we're just like, we got these guns and we got this big military, and we're gonna like shoot everybody and control everything, and it's just so not where I would want to put my focus. It's so embarrassing. So yeah, I taught scuba diving in Thailand and Sri Lanka. That was really amazing. And I was an acrobat in Hong Kong.
Oh, really? Yeah. What was that like?
It was awesome. You can't see, I'm little. I didn't break 100 pounds. I finally broke 100 pounds, I think, in my 40s.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm little. I have this little acrobat body. So, I was just kind of disillusioned with, you get a degree from university, and it's like, it doesn't necessarily guarantee you a job. And I was just like, well, what do I do now? And, I just kept getting offered work abroad, doing athletic stuff.
Sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. A friend of mine's got 2 degrees, and for many years he was just checking people in a hotel. And he's
to be free. I didn't want to work at like a pharmaceutical company, and it was only later where, like I think a lot of, and this is just true, I believe, with a lot of science, and especially with sort of medicine and pharmaceuticals and stuff. It's like, we can do all this stuff trying to be healthy, right? And take all these drugs. And I mean, some certainly drugs are necessary, but there's only, you can also like take care of yourself too. I mean, it's got to be a balance. I mean, a lot of the modern diseases that we have are self-inflicted, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And
so
I'm hoping,
I just really wanted to like be healthy, which meant like being out in the world and moving and being super physical and having fitness. But then when I moved back to America, I realized there's only so much like exercise and good food, if our environment is polluted. And at that point, I think there was a lot more opportunities in climate change. When I was at university, we studied climate change, but it seemed like far away, and there weren't jobs in it. And then all of a sudden, it's like, it's not far away. It's here. It's like in our face, and there was work in it. And I felt like I could do something really meaningful to kind of make a difference globally by working on climate change. So again, when I first got my degree, I could have gotten like a job in a lab with a lab coat, maybe working for a pharmaceutical company. And it just didn't seem like what I wanted to do. I was interested in the actual experiment side of it, the science side of it, but not in the practical side of like work. I just wanted to be out doing field work, which is the most interesting part of science.
It would be. No, absolutely. Getting out into the real world and actually experiencing things would be fantastic. And that's kind of one thing I'm hoping that with this, bring it back to the whole COVID, that it's a bit of a wake-up call for everyone to start taking care of their bodies a bit more, because everyone is just very living a sedentary lifestyle and really don't get out. And I'm hoping that, because it's, if you're in one of the high risk categories, I mean, if you're old, you're old, like that's just, it is what it is. But if you've got respiratory issues due to obesity or something like that, I mean, that can very easily be avoided just by going for walks around the block and things like that.
Well, I mean, and like I have a lot of girlfriends who've had breast cancer. I mean, I don't want to put it on them to go like, oh, it's your fault that you're sick. Because it's not. I mean, it's a combination. There are some diseases that, we're responsible for, and there are some diseases that we're not. And it's not anybody's fault if they have something necessarily. But yeah, I mean, the more healthy we can be, the better. And a lot of it is environmental toxins too. You live in a city that's polluted, it's like you're going to have breathing problems already before COVID, before the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why China was impacted so greatly, was just, there was that, the obviously levels of poverty and where people were with the wet markets. But the pollution in the air as well. I mean, that cannot be good for your lungs just in general. Because where I am, luckily, there's, it's only maybe a 30 or maybe 45-minute drive. And then I'm out, it's called Kaipo Forest. So you can actually almost taste the difference in the air. It's just so clean, and you actually feel comfortable taking deep breaths. Whereas if you're in the city, you really notice that difference in levels of pollution and just the thickness in the air.
And yeah, it's not, I mean, we have to acknowledge that we have privilege, we have
very
economic
lucky, absolutely.
privilege,
Yeah.
and not everybody has that. And it's really deeply unfair. And then there's also people who are even so much more privileged than we are, who, can just kind of buy their way into everything. So I mean, I think that part of the problem with this pandemic, and certainly with climate change, the people who did the least to cause it are the ones who are suffering the most.
Yeah, absolutely. The poverty levels, because there was was it an article? It was a Smart Lab City. It was an interview they did with you. I basically noticed it was kind of like structured as questions and answers in a blog.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that it was a lot of discussion about the people that are in your poorer demographics, that they are really suffering the most, and it's hard on them, and it's for say us that are much more privileged just because of where we live and what we have, really need to be grateful for that. But it's also there's things that we can hopefully do as a community and as a society to help reduce pollution levels and help with climate change. As you said, it's to reduce it to 6% every year is going to be a big ask. So, I mean, what can people do at home to help with this?
Well, how we started this was like you were telling me how you wanted to be positive, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that is the biggest positive with climate, and certainly you're saying it with this pandemic, is that we have to come together in our local communities, right? So connect with your neighbors. That's the most important thing you can do. So, for example, I built a relationship with my city council members, and I got an appointment on a sustainable commissioner with the city council, my local city council. So everybody can participate, right? So whether or not you join a green club or environmental club, and if you don't have a green club and an environmental club in your community, then you make one, right? And you get together with the people in your community. So there's also like a Buy Nothing group, a backyard food growers group. And so we're all sharing, right? So we're sharing food with each other. We're sharing, we share all these material possessions. So there's a lot of people with kids, and their kids grow out of these clothes and they get traded, or like you want to let go of something that you don't need anymore and you give it to somebody else. So everybody's Mary Kondoing their place right now and cleaning, and somebody really wants what you have so it doesn't get in the landfill, and that people don't have to waste their carbon footprint on buying more and more and more and more stuff. So it builds this community. And then certainly stuff like growing your own food, when you think about what it takes to ship the food from the market all the way to the grocery store, what has to be refrigerated, and then to your home, and just sharing things locally within the community makes a huge difference. And then we all share kind of tips, and then we can get together on a much broader way and force political change. So, and what I mean about political change is, instead of just knowing who the president is, right, voting during the big showy elections, you want to know who your representatives are and vote for people who support the environment, right? And not only vote for them, it's one thing if I know who my mayor is. It's a whole other thing if the mayor knows who I am.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you have to build relationships. It's all about building relationships. It is not just I showed up at city council once and stood up for 3 minutes and spoke and they didn't listen to me. It's like over time, showing up. So I also built a relationship with the director of the power plant. Go to your local power plant, find out where your electricity comes from. What's your electricity mix in your house? It's usually on the bill or on the website. of your power generation. So look, what percentage comes from coal, what percentage comes from natural gas, what percentage comes from hydroelectric or solar or wind, and educate yourself on that. So for example, my power plant, it expires, it runs out, just like a car lasts, a decade or so. Power plant lasts about 50 years. So ours expires in 2035.
Okay.
So I've been in conversation with the director of the power plant to find out, okay, what are we going to do when this guy expires, or what are we going to invest in? And so you can have all these meaningful conversations with people, and it's not a one shot. It's a build relationship. What does this person need to hear? What can I offer? How can I support? How can I educate myself? And I've met all these neighbors. So that's the benefit for me. And if there was a fire or a flood or a fucking hurricane or some damn thing, then I'm going to know my neighbors and they're going to know me, which also has a selfish benefit for me too. And then I'll add one other thing is composting, which people think it's hard. What, I got to learn something, I got to pay somebody. It's the easiest thing. You take your food scraps and you throw them down, you do nothing, and it turns into soil. It's amazing, right? You can look at it if you want, the cycle of life.
Yeah.
But when you think about it, I've been to my landfill. So in addition to meeting your city council members, getting to know your mayor, showing up, being civically involved with your neighbors. And then you can tell your neighbors too, right? Like, hey, I met with the mayor and this is what they said. And you just build relationships in your own community, because that's where it matters. Anyway, so so people are afraid to compost.
It's so lazy. It's great. You finish your banana, you throw the peel in
throw it down.
That's it.
So I built relationships with, we have a recycle center, and I went to they took me on a tour of the landfill, and then you can actually do the math. I didn't do it, but the guy who works at the recycle center, his name's Craig, did the math, and he showed me, well, this is what we're spending on hauling trash, and this is what the percentage of compostable material that ends up going in the trash that ends up being hauled to the landfill. The landfill's about 100 miles away, right? And it's not in a energy efficient truck, right? The trash truck, it's some giant fossil fuel burning monster truck that's carrying all this shit up to the landfill. And when you think about it, food is heavy. Wasted food is really heavy. Definitely. So it costs a lot of fuel, and it's just going. So that's something super basic, is like composting. And you don't have to if you don't have a home, a backyard, if you just have an apartment, you can do under the counter composting. And we even have in our community, people who live in apartments can pair up with people who have backyards, and they drop off their food.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, so you make friendships. One of my favorite things, a girlfriend brought me worm poo.
Yeah.
And we dug it into the ground together, and that was right around the Christmas time, and everybody was doing the materialistic thing, which I can't deal with. And I was like, oh, I just want worm poo.
Yeah.
And it's the most healthy stuff. So she does worm composting, and she has some chickens. So it's just about building community, and I've learned so much. People come over, they bring me, oh, I've got an extra tomato plant, or oh, here's some succulents. We in California, it's similar to Australia, we have a lot of drought, so we've got the drought tolerant landscaping, and so we share cuttings with each other. And it is, I think that deep underneath everything, the overconsumption and the materialism, I have to have a big car and drive it, and I have to have a big house, and I have to have all this fancy shit. It's just to fill up that loneliness inside. And why not fill it up with people in your community who aren't going to judge you by your material possessions, who are going to just judge you by your worm poo.
Yeah.
And it's just it's a better life. So you're not thinking of oh, I have to give up something. You're not giving up things. You're gaining free time.
You're enriching yourself in other ways.
When I'm looking out here at a clean office space rather than a bunch of clutter filled with something that I bought at the store because I was feeling lonely and shit about my stupid fucking job. And so then I had to go do some retail therapy that lasts 5 minutes, and then I hate the stupid fucking thing. No, you're giving up. That is what you're giving up. And you're getting a clean space. You're getting mental clarity. You're getting time with your friends and family, time to spend with people who you love. So it's about reevaluating what is worth something in your life.
Definitely.
Anyway, that's
Well, it's
that's what
yeah.
people can do.
No, that's awesome. That's really helpful, and I reckon that little clip I'm gonna scatter that around the internet to promote this as well, because that's great.
Good.
But yeah, that's it. It's just about enriching your life with other things, with friends, family, and people around you. And there's an interesting fun fact I learned a while ago that lonely people really connect more with the logos of people. So like the KFC, where it's Colonel Sanders, it really makes sense as to why they've been so successful all these years. So everyone's like, oh,
Weird.
fancy seeing the Colonel again. So yeah, getting some of that fast food chicken.
Sorry, my head. I have all these. I have 1 degree of separation from Colonel Sanders.
Yep.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. It's kind of not that interesting of a story, but
How so? Like, I'm quite interested in this.
when
Who
I
doesn't like the
first
Colonel?
moved to LA, okay, I'll tell you my dumb Colonel Sanders story. So when I first moved to LA,
Yeah.
I got a job at an Oriental rug store in Beverly Hills, just
Yep.
a retail job, right? And the guy who owned the rug store owned the block of buildings. And one of his tenants was a guy named Grady Sanders, who was the son of Colonel Sanders. And so they used to sit up in his office, and he would wear a white suit with
Yeah.
a black bolo tie,
Really rocking
and
the
he had
look.
a really red face because he was an alcoholic, and he
Yep.
was gay. And I'm like, oh my God, that's Colonel Sanders' son,
Yep.
Grady Sanders.
Oh, that's
Anyway, so
awesome.
when you said Colonel Sanders, I just thought, like, my mind was like, anyway, not that many people know the Colonel.
Yeah, that's
But
awesome.
that's what it's like when you live in LA, you know people.
You would, yeah.
Colonel Sanders kid.
Well, I didn't expect us to have that conversation today.
You might want to delete that. It's not that
No,
interesting.
it's great. Oh shit! Yeah. But yeah, people will tune in. It'll just be us laughing for 5 minutes. Like, what the fuck is this show?
About this weird guy. He was pretty weird.
Yeah, that's cool. So I guess yeah. So with what I'd really like to know about when you worked with NASA. So what was that like? Like, so with working with them, because I'm just fascinated with NASA. Like, I've got their app on my phone, and they don't update as regularly as they should. But yeah, I'm just absolutely fascinated with the whole thing. So what was it like working with everyone there, and you know, what was some things you experienced that were really interesting whilst working with them?
Sure. Well, I'll start with some of the things I liked. It was, in a way, it was kind of like a kid in a candy store, because what worked really well, if you're a self-starter.
Yep.
So it's like, here's this laboratory, which is like 3 times the size of Disneyland, huge, right? Yeah. And there's clean rooms and rovers and all kinds of really cool stuff happening. And basically you could do what the hell you want. You come up with your idea and then just go do it, right? So for me, that aspect of it worked really well. And I was a people person. I would just walk down the halls and like go talk to somebody. But then there's a mix, right? So it's mostly engineers, like 90% engineers, maybe 10% scientists, and then there's the administrators. Now there was most people would think that, people are like the women in Hidden Figures, space geniuses, and they are there, right? Yeah. But there's paper pushing morons too. And so me and the paper pushing morons would clash, because I'm like an upstart. So I would get along really well with the engineers and the scientists, but the administrators would be like, because and when I first got there, I was like, I'm gonna change everything and pull the stick out of these people's ass. And oh my God, it was a phone pole shoved up their ass, and there was no way I was gonna pull it out ever.
So they were just pushing paperwork. It was just a 9 to 5 for them.
Well, I mean, people, I didn't understand why some people, they would literally just stay in their office. And like this in their shitty little office. I'm scrunching over if you can't see me. I'm like hunched over. But yeah, people were super there's 20,000 employees. There's a great range, right? There are the space geniuses, the paper pushing morons, the kind of afraid people who were just, I'm going to stay at my desk, So so there was a mix, right? Just like kind of probably lots of places that you work. And I think sadly the problem with the administrators who work there is that because NASA is such an amazing brand,
Yep.
some of the people wanted to work there just because it was an amazing brand. So they were into power and climbing and stepping on other people.
Oh,
And I
okay.
was like, oh, well, that's not, it's not my game. It's not my game.
Yeah.
So that was the negative side of it. Another interesting aspect of it I found was how the science and the engineering kind of flowed together. So the engineers would always be coming up with new stuff, right? And the scientists would be doing research. And so it was this interesting pattern of how the engineers would create, let's say, a new instrument, and the scientists would be like, okay, now we can find new shit because we've got this new instrument. And then the
That's cool.
scientists would be like, we need to discover new shit. And the engineers would be like, okay, well, how can we build a new instrument? And that interlocking weaving over time
Really feed off each other.
was super interesting to just see that integration. So if you could get away from, you know, the power people or the head trippers or the people who just wanted to like, I'm the boss of you, because it was a hierarchy. If you could kind of get away from that and just look at the pure interesting aspect of it, that was certainly amazing. And I mean, it took lots of teams. I mean, some of the missions, most of the missions would take literally decades to plan. So like you're planning this thing and watching, you know, through all the testing and through all, like, you know, they've got the software people and the hardware people and the instrument people and then the space flight people and then the science objective people all interacting together. So that part was really cool. But the paper pushing morons can go fuck off.
They can go fuck themselves, basically.
I know, right? It was just kind of a matter of like, how do we get our work done with these people?
Yeah. Okay. No, that's awesome. So other than Greenland, so what did you do any really interesting missions? You know, for whether it was climate change or for, you know, checking out the ice shelves or anything like that?
Well, so my background's in oceanography, and the ocean has a lot to do with climate change. Remember, I told you that
Yep.
carbon dioxide stays in Earth for on the order of 2,000 years, and that's because it goes very readily from the atmosphere to the ocean, and the ocean is really good storage for heat and carbon. So it's going to take a long time to, once the carbon and the heat gets into the ocean, it kind of stays there for a long time. So I was looking at, there's a bunch of satellites that look at sea level from space. So I would go to the launch. That was always super fun, watching the satellite launch.
Yeah.
And I just, if I look distracted, my cat is over there
No, that's
creating
what cat you have.
havoc. I'm like, what's that? It's my cat is tearing shit up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so going to satellite, you know, and watching the whole thing. So you could watch in the clean room where they were literally building the instrumentation and talk to software engineers and flight engineers and all that, and then go to the launch and see the thing launch. I've watched 2 satellites malfunction and not be able to launch, and that's certainly heartbreaking, but many more succeeded. You know, you're just traveling to the different NASA centers, going to Houston and getting to kind of, I went to Houston where the human space flight is. And my goal, I got the special tour, just me. And my goal was to be like, ask if I could touch everything until they said no. And they're letting me drive in these like lunar rovers. And I was like doing pull-ups in the space shuttle. They have a mock space shuttle. And I'm like in there climbing around. So that was super awesome. You know, just like I'm more of I like to be 3-dimensional. I'm not much of a desk person. So that was really cool. And yeah, some of the other NASA centers where you get to kind of see they do, so NASA does space and aeronautics. So they've got like wind tunnels and ice tunnels for airplanes. There's a big hangar up about an hour where I live where a lot of the airborne science is done. So hanging out in the hangar, going on those planes, that was fun.
Yeah.
Like airplanes are boring, like commercial flights. So the first NASA flight I was on, it's a DC-8, super comfortable seats, maybe 3/4 of the seats are removed, and there's just instruments, right? So it's a flying science laboratory, and literally there's like holes in the airplane with instruments poking out.
Yeah.
And a lot of the windows have been removed and put optical glass in. So you know how you try to take a photo out of an airplane window, it's that yellow plastic.
Yeah.
The photo isn't good. So they have optical glass instead, so you can get really good photos out of it.
Crystal
And
clear.
instruments are sticking out, and then comfortable. So you get in the plane, and you're sitting there, and you've got a headset on and a microphone, right? And you're strapped in. And so you can hear everything. And the engineers are talking to the pilots. So they're saying, you know, you got to do another loop because we want to get that transect because we need this data, and they're talking. But the very first thing you hear after takeoff is, okay, get up out of your seats and start working, which is great because if you don't like sitting still, because the problem with an airplane isn't flying, it's sitting in that shitty little seat. So as long as you've got a comfortable seat, and so everybody's just doing stuff, and you can go up and hang out with the pilots and see, and they're not, you know, a commercial flight, again, it's just autopilot. It's a straight line. These are not straight lines, right? So you've got, you know, the flight coordinator with an iPad kind of with the flight path on it. And the flight path looks like a spaghetti because we're going here, and they're actually literally flying the plane. So you've got to go to this altitude to collect this sort of data, and this other altitude to collect this sort of data. And, you know, so it was interesting, I thought, you know.
That's fantastic. No, that's awesome. Because I always wondered what it was like to work either, you know, for NASA or to just go there and experience it. So that's a really cool insight.
Yeah, no, the three-dimensional aspects of it, getting to climb around, talking to people. So those were like my biggest successes. And my biggest failures was not doing so well with the uptight admin people.
Yeah, no, that's very fair enough. Well, I think a lot of us struggle with if you're working with people who sticks up their asses, it's very difficult to be productive.
But, you know, remember, NASA is 50 years old. So I think that sort of happens with the, you know, when it was young and spry and it was like an upstart institution that they wanted to do big things and be super creative. And then it kind of got ossified, you know, and you see like the SpaceXs trying to compete with big.
Well, what are your thoughts on, I was going to ask you that. What are your thoughts on like privatization of places like SpaceX, for instance? Like,
right. Well, I'm not a big, I don't, look, I don't give a fuck about Mars. I don't. We're going to go to Mars. Like, really? Why? What's in Mars?
Why don't we fix where we are first? Yeah.
So we can, exactly. So we can eat Matt Damon's poo potatoes. Like, gross. There's not, it's like, I mean, I've been in, I was talking about some of the cool stuff. One of the NASA centers in Virginia, the NASA Center in Virginia, that's where they make these like extraterrestrial modules where you would live, right? So you know how a rocket looks like a penis?
Yes.
These look like eggs.
I have noticed that.
Yeah. So these are eggs. They look like a bunch of eggs. So I was in there, and like they're cool, but it's like for maybe a weekend camping trip, not like I'm gonna live on this thing. It'd be awful. It'd be awful. Like, I'm telling you, even at the space station, you know, I've been doing some stuff. People are super curious about the space station. So I have friends who work on the space station, and I ask them a lot of questions. And it's like the whole pooing and peeing and bathing thing up there, it's not good. It's not good. You wear your underwear for like 2 weeks, and then you incinerate them.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, well.
And you wipe your junk with like one of those little handy wipes.
Oh, yeah. Because, Russia refuses to drink their own pee up there, whereas the US is happy to, recycle that.
No, everybody drinks their own pee.
Oh, really? Okay. Oh, my apologies there. Yeah, I'd heard.
And not only do they drink their own pee, there's rodents up there. You know, they're doing experiments on rodents, and they collect the rodent pee, and that goes back into the cycle. So not only you're drinking your own pee, you're drinking your crewmate's pee, and you're drinking rat piss.
That's crazy.
And I can tell you that 72 rats equals 1 human. as far as quantity of piss.
That is such an amazing fun fact that I'm
Fun
now
facts.
glad I know.
Fun facts to know. But it's not just pee, it's like every fart, every sneeze, every sweat.
Yep. Oh,
It's
I
still
think you think
there.
it's bad recycled air when you're in a commercial flight. I mean, yeah,
Can
man.
you imagine? Well, the first thing they do is like give everybody loads of Sudafed because supposedly it smells really bad.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough.
They just load them up with Sudafed at the
Oh,
beginning and then they get used to it. But yeah, I mean, it has to smell terrible. There's no bathing.
yeah.
You can't open a window or bathe. You
No,
just,
no, exactly.
and you have to exercise like 5 hours a day so your bones don't disintegrate.
You'd have to. I mean, the bone density decreases like so
Anyway,
significantly
yeah.
after such
So
a
then
short period of
you
time.
just wipe your pits and your junk with your handy wipe and you're good to go. It
Oh,
sounds
shit.
awful. And you can't smell soil. They have done some tests, though. They do all these tests on mood. And they discovered that when they are growing some lettuce and some flowers up there.
Yep.
And when they do their experiments with the lettuce and the flowers, they do get in a slightly better mood.
Okay. Oh, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Same as here. If you go dig in the dirt, it puts you in a better mood.
Yeah, no, they I like having. I don't know how accurate it is, but they think that if you've got lavender around, it helps just with study and things like that. And I got some lavender bushes out the back.
All
So
the smells. Yeah, I planted a geranium yesterday. So we were, how I was talking about neighbors and community. So I was walking
yeah,
around with my husband and dog the other night, and I saw a plant that kind of looked like a geranium. I wasn't sure, and I rubbed the leaves and smelled them, and it was like, oh my God. And Bobby was a little further ahead. And I was like, you got to smell this. So he comes back,
yeah.
smells it, and the lady pokes her head out the door, and she's like, oh, you should take some.
Oh, that's so nice.
And she's explaining what it is. So there was a branch that had broken off because it had rained and been a little bit windy. So I took the broken branch, stuck it in the ground. The little fucker's blooming already, and it
Oh,
smells
really?
amazing.
That's
Yeah.
cool.
So you
That's
can't
awesome.
have that. There's no that. There's no that. Smells are really important. I think smells are probably the most important thing. I know we don't think of smell that much,
Yeah.
but it's like if a bad smell is like can ruin everything, and a good smell really really makes a difference.
Definitely. I if I look like I'm looking elsewhere, I was trying to remember the name of it. There's an app I've got. It's called Plant Snap, and
Oh yeah,
put up the
yeah.
plants. Yeah, and actually you take a photo and it will tell you what it is. And yeah, so I found that was I wouldn't say cool, maybe more geeky than cool, but it's still really
But it's
interesting.
useful because sometimes you want to know what a thing is. My garden's doing pretty well these days. I'm
Yeah.
pretty happy with it.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, it have to. I mean, you're at home, like it gets
Come
tended
to home,
to.
but sometimes it just does stuff on its own too. Like
Yeah.
it surprises me. It's not all me. It is like nature. Like literally, I had $2 worth of seeds, and I've got so much food. There's no way. I was shocked at how much food is coming. And then I again, we have a drought tolerant. It's either food or drought tolerant, so no grass.
Yep.
So I had these like weird cactus things, and they just decided to bloom.
Okay.
And they have giant erections that are 25 feet tall.
Yeah.
It's like 8 meters.
Yeah.
They're crazy. It's like, whoa, what happened? It's amazing. And I go and I stand next to them. I just stand next to them looking at them because they're wild. And then there's pink and purple flowers all around the bottom. You know those ice plant?
Yeah.
You guys have an ice plant?
Yeah.
So it's crazy in bloom right now. It's just popping.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I've found as I've gotten older, I've had much more of an appreciation for nature, and I don't know if that's what stemmed from wanting to learn more about climate change and sharing that message. But yeah, I really have been appreciating nature so much more these last few years, especially. So I'm trying to do a lot more nature walks, and I'll spend more time out in the garden. I might, instead of sitting in front of the TV, I'll sit outside with say dinner, and I've got a big wall of vines there that have all these different blossoms of these really weird white flowers and all sorts. And yeah, so it's something
that smell good. So true story, this is happening. Remember how I told you that we have this neighborhood group that we trade stuff?
Yeah, the worm poo and all that. Yeah.
Worm poo. There's a lot of citrus that grows where I live. So if your citrus tree is, got a ton, you can't eat it all, so you're sharing it.
That's
So
cool.
this
Okay.
woman, she made jam and marmalade and jelly out of all the citrus, and we have lime jelly. And you take a spoon of lime jelly and you plop it in tequila with a little bit of ice.
Oh yeah, that would be good. That would be so good.
That's what I'm having as soon as we're off this call.
Oh, that is fantastic. Yeah, well, I was thinking about it because it would have been.
I know it's morning for you, but it's,
Yeah, I know.
it's drinking time for me.
Well, with a lot of the previous podcast episodes, I'd have a wine or a beer or something like that. Whereas we started this about 7:30 a.m. and I was like, yeah, it's probably a little early for a wine at this stage.
I'm having a tequila with lime jelly.
Yeah, that's
we make
fantastic.
we make our own limoncello and our own orangello from our fruit trees here.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, no, I'm more of a cognac guy, or I drink a little bit of beer, but I'm also my partner got me onto red wine, and for the last year or so, I've just been enjoying that a lot more than I should.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's one of my goals. I will do this. I want to build a still.
Yeah.
And distill some stuff. Yeah. I mean,
That'd
there's
be
no
cool.
reason why I couldn't have a backyard still. Why not?
Exactly.
And I would like video it and show people how to do it. Because at this point, we're gonna, when the apocalypse continues and gets worse, we're gonna need to know some shit, and distilling is gonna be a really important thing.
Exactly. The guy I live with, my housemate, he's been keen to try some honey mead, and I was looking up funny names for mead, and I found one. I'm like, all right, if we do actually brew some honey mead, we need to call it mead curtains. But yeah.
I encourage people to, experiment. It's
try new things.
all science.
Yeah, isn't it?
It's chemistry.
Really,
yeah.
That's it. So, Laura, I was wondering, so like with you contribute to Forbes, and is there anywhere else that online that people can see what you do, or is there any thing you'd like to promote whilst I've got you on here as a thank you for coming on?
Well, I'm in process. I feel like I am one of those caterpillars who built a chrysalis. Yep. And you know how they turn into goo for a while?
Yeah, I only learned that recently. That's crazy.
Yeah, and then they become a butterfly. So, I got a literary agent, and I wrote a book proposal, and it got rejected. So my agent said, let's do a rewrite. And then the coronavirus hit. So I'm kind of staying at home. The book is about using community as the antidote to climate change.
Okay.
So it will come out eventually. I'm just working on a rewrite. I'm working on a podcast with my brother. So I'm kind of really trying to reinvent myself. It was a blow. I mean, you work at NASA for a decade, and a new president comes in and they try to silence you. It was traumatic, and I feel like I'm just getting over the grief process of that now. But part of that is just come to feel all the emotions that I have and to sit in this time. But so at the moment, I've just, I've got my website, my social media pages, and just that Forbes is the only thing that's kind of out in the world, other than I was scheduled to do 4 international speeches, and they just all one after another canceled or postponed, Yeah. So, maybe invite me over to Australia, and we'll do. I like to do public speaking.
And, no, that'd be fantastic. But no, I completely understand what you mean. Like it's a low blow. It's a hit to the pride. Because I was years ago, I was a state manager of pharmaceuticals for a while, and I was like, all right, I want to go out into the world and start my own business. And initially it didn't really work out, and I had to get a job for a while, and that was just such a blow. And it really did take a while to, kind of recover from that mentally. And then I'm back on my feet now, which is all good, but it takes time. And when you're in such a level of where you're at, and you feel good about yourself, and then something happens like that, and it takes time. That's all it is. So it's fantastic that you're starting to come back.
Well, I will. I mean, there's been trauma. I think America has been traumatized by this current president. A lot of women have been traumatized by him. for sure, and a
The
lot
guy's
of
an asshole. Like, it's
environmentalists
just, yeah, it's
and
just, I
diplomatists.
just don't, I understand how we got voted in, but I also don't understand how we got voted in. It's ridiculous.
It's called a clusterfuck.
I think that is the
The
best way.
scientific word is clusterfuck, basically.
Yeah, in the
But yeah,
dictionary,
I'll
there'll be a little
rise
picture of
again.
Trump next to it.
Someday I will rise again. But yeah, during this pandemic, I think the pandemic is teaching us, I gotta stay in that mushy chrysalis. I'm not ready yet. Butterfly is not not ready. Not ready. Coming. It's like, when you go online and the circle spins and spins and spins. That's me still.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think this would be a really good opportunity as once again, trying to find a little positive in the, with these trying times. It's people are going to get the opportunity to really find themselves, because if they're stuck at home in isolation, it's like, well, what are you going to do with your time? Because you can't just sit there and watch Netflix all the time. So people might try
Go slow.
and
Go
um,
slow. Look at yourself. Feel your true feelings and follow what you really want inside. Find what brings you joy. So that's what I'm doing. And it's slow. It's
yeah,
slow as fuck.
yeah. Well, but that's human nature. It's just about small steps just to progress and develop, who we are, whether it's, if you want to read a book that you haven't read before, or the other day I bought, it was a birthday gift, and it was basically for my partner there, and she it was an adult paint by numbers. So it's just, I thought, because we can't go out anywhere, we can't do
Yeah.
any experiences, I thought, why not do an indoor experience? So it's basically just a landscape, or you can get animals or whatever else, and you just get a little paint set and it's numbers, and you're painting each one, and you have a few drinks while you do it, and it was a lot of fun. Yeah. So, yeah, Laura, thank you so much for coming on. This has been an incredible chat. It's been really interesting, and I've had a blast. And it's been so fun. So, with your website, what is your website there? Just for everyone listening, I'll make sure I drop all the links that you
It's
sent me earlier.
Laura Faye 10, LauraFayen. That's my name. LauraFaye10.com is my website. And I've got all the social medias, all the things.
Yeah, no, fantastic. So I'll make sure that, all the links you sent me, I'll scatter those around. And I guess, on a final note, is there any little take home, because we did cover before about how people can help, especially in the community, but is there any last point you'd like to share with everyone?
Yeah, reach out to your neighbors and, figure out deep inside you what works for you, and then share it.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Okay, fantastic. But no, that was awesome. I really enjoyed that. So thank you for coming on, and I'll make sure I promote the shit out of this, just so that way it gets your message out there.
Okay. Yay! And I'll promote it too. Yeah,
thank you.
Okay. Keep in touch. Keep in touch.
Yeah, I'd love to. Well, I mean, when your book comes out, if it's going to come out, or even when you start your podcast, send me the link, and I can just update on YouTube and stuff. I can actually put the link down in there, because I've still got episodes live from, say, nearly.
Of course.
So people are still, I'm getting, notifications almost daily that I'm always getting new subscribers to the podcast.
Nice.
So, yeah, if I put the link in there, no doubt even if it takes 6 months, people will start to listen to it eventually. So yeah, please do, whenever you get that started, and it'd be a really interesting listen as well. So I'll definitely have to give that a listen.
Awesome.
No, cool. All right. Well, I guess I'll leave you to your day. This has been awesome. We almost hit the 2-hour mark as well, which was cool.
I know.
So
we both have the gift of gab.
yeah, I know. I do like to waffle on a bit, talk a bit of shit.
Good.
So.
No, it's good. If you want to host a podcast, you have to be able to be good at talking. That's like your basic requirement.
Definitely. So no, but it's cool. But yeah, I really do appreciate your time. It's been fantastic. So I guess I'll leave you to it, and I'm gonna go have some breakfast, and then
I'm gonna have some tequila.
What
hey,
tequila
you probably
do you have?
start drinking early, huh?
What tequila do you have?
My husband bought it. He goes to the store. I can't deal with the store even when there's not a pandemic.
Yeah,
he just comes home with things.
That's cool.
It might even be a mezcal. I don't know. We'll find out.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I got
Sorry.
some Jose Cuervo up in the cupboard somewhere. So
Yeah, it could be Cazadores. I'm not sure. Anyway, we're
okay.
tequila people. I like gin too.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of gin. Up so where I'm in South Australia, so SA has we're very lucky. We have some of the best wines in the world.
Yeah, of course. We
I
drink
think
Australian wine. Yeah, of
oh yeah, yeah. Well, I think
course we do.
we're one of the
Yeah.
biggest exporters to China for wines. So
Mhm.
that's pretty cool for being such a small place. And yeah, I went up there not that long ago, and there was a gin place there, and yeah, they had some of the best gins. It was these award-winning ones. I'm trying to think of the name now, but yeah, it was so good. They had them in their little orange wedges to the side, and
Yeah, I know. I want to take
so
some of
good.
the plants that I have in the backyard and put it in the gin and make uh, flavored gins and
Gin's really
flavored
good for that.
vodkas.
Yeah, some of
Yeah.
some of the plants are very strong, and so I've got to be wary of which ones I have. But I'll still try them, and if it tastes like shit, I just won't have again.
You can add a little soda water.
Yeah, no, exactly. So,
Yeah.
oh, that's cool. Well, all right, Laura, I'll leave you to it. But yeah, thank you again. This has been awesome, and yeah, we'll keep in touch. And yeah, I really would love to hear when your podcast comes up, and I'll be sure to update it so the links go in there so other people can hear it.
Awesome. And thank you, and thank all your listeners as well.